Remember Dick Gregory, the sharp-witted comedian whose fearless stand-up crossed over into powerful activism during the civil rights movement? He wasn't just a comic, he was a truth-teller, an author, and a fighter for justice who left an undeniable mark on American history. When he passed away in 2017, at the age of 84, he left behind a fortune valued at $8 million, a large family, and a legacy that still sparks conversation today. So what happened to Dick Gregory's house? How did he build his wealth? And what untold stories remain hidden in the shadow of his tragic death? Join us as we uncover the private world of Dick Gregory, his abandoned home, his family, his net worth, and the legacy of a man who changed comedy and activism forever. Dick Gregory was born in St. Louis, Missouri, to Presley Gregory and Lucille, who worked as a house cleaner. From a young age, he showed talent and drive, excelling both in school and in athletics. At Sumner High School, with the support of dedicated teachers like Warren Street. James Gregory thrived as a runner and went on to win the state cross-country championship in 1950. His athletic success earned him a track scholarship to Southern Illinois University, where he broke school records in the half-mile and mile races and was named the university's outstanding student athlete in 1953. Gregory was also a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. His college years, however, were interrupted in 1954 when he was drafted into the U.S. Army. While serving, Gregory's natural gift for humor caught the attention of his commanding officer, who encouraged him to perform. It was during this time that he entered and won several Army talent shows, planting the seeds for what would become his career in comedy. After his military service, Gregory briefly returned to Southern Illinois University in 1956, but quickly realized the school cared more about his running than his education. Disillusioned, he dropped out and set his sights on a different future. Determined to chase his dream, Gregory moved to Chicago, a hub for rising black entertainers. There, he became part of a groundbreaking generation of comedians that included Nipsey Russell, Bill Cosby, and Godfrey Cambridge. Unlike the stereotypical minstrel-style acts that had long dominated the stage, this new wave of comics spoke boldly about real life and current events. Gregory, in particular, used humor to confront America's racial divide. One of his early biting jokes summed up his approach perfectly. "Segregation is not all bad. Have you ever heard of a collision where the people in the back of the bus got hurt?" From a young age, Dick Gregory used his talents to help support his family, often taking whatever gigs he could find. His first real taste of comedy came while serving in the U.S. Army in the mid-1950s. Drafted in 1954 while studying at Southern Illinois University, Gregory spent a year and a half stationed at Fort Cavazos in Texas, Fort Lee in Virginia, and Fort Smith in Arkansas. His natural sense of humor stood out during his time in service, and he often entertained fellow soldiers with quick wit and sharp observations. When he was discharged in 1956, Gregory returned to Southern Illinois University, but ultimately left without earning a degree. Instead, he packed up and moved to Chicago with one clear goal: to pursue comedy professionally. By 1958, he had opened his own nightclub, the Apex Club in Illinois. But the business quickly failed, leaving him in financial hardship. Still determined, Gregory pressed forward. In 1959, he landed steady work as master of ceremonies at the Roberts Show Club, a black-owned venue in Chicago. To keep afloat, Gregory also worked for the U.S. Postal Service during the day, while at night he performed in small nightclubs along the Chitlin Circuit. These venues, which primarily catered to black audiences, were the training ground for many performers at the time. Gregory would later reflect on the barriers facing black comics, explaining, "Blacks could sing and dance in the white nightclubs, but weren't allowed to stand flat-footed and talk to white folks, which is what a comic does." His big break came in 1961. While performing at the Roberts Show bar, Gregory was spotted by Playboy founder Hugh Hefner, who booked him at the Chicago Playboy Club. That night, Gregory's act captured the attention of the audience with its bold mix of race, politics, and biting humor. One of his jokes quickly became a classic. I understand there are a good many Southerners in the room tonight. I know the South very well. I spent 20 years there one night. Last time I was down south, I walked into this restaurant, and this white waitress came up to me and said, "We don't serve colored people here." I said, "That's all right. I don't eat colored people. Bring me a whole fried chicken." Then these three white boys came up to me and said, "Boy, we're giving you fair warning. Anything you do to that chicken, we're going to do to you." So I put down my knife and fork, picked up that chicken, and I kissed it. Then I said, "Line up, boys." Dick Gregory often credited Hugh Hefner for giving him the break that launched his career. After seeing Gregory perform at the Roberts Show bar, Hefner invited him to the Chicago Playboy Club as a last-minute replacement for comedian Professor Irwin Corey. What was supposed to be a one-night gig in 1961 turned into a 6-week engagement. That run earned Gregory national attention, a feature in Time magazine, and a coveted guest spot on The Jack Paar Show. From that moment on, he was no longer just a rising comedian. He was a household name. That same year, Gregory made his New York debut at the Blue Angel nightclub. The performance was recorded live and later released as his first comedy album, East and West. His sharp, fearless humor quickly set him apart, but it also stirred controversy in conservative circles. Some audiences bristled at his direct commentary on race and politics. At one point, the administration at the University of Tennessee labeled him an extreme racist and canceled his student-invited appearance, calling it an outrage and an insult to many citizens of this state. The students fought back, taking the matter to court with civil rights attorney William Kunstler representing them. In 1969, they won. The case, Smith versus University of Tennessee, forced the school to adopt an open speaker system, allowing voices like Gregory's to finally be heard on campus. True to form, Gregory returned to perform there in April 1970, proving that his voice couldn't be silenced. In 1964, Gregory's groundbreaking autobiography, Nigger, hit shelves. The title was intentionally provocative, chosen to confront racism head-on. The book became a bestseller, and decades later it remains in print, with both trade paperback and audiobook editions released in 2019. Gregory's fearless comedy, activism, and storytelling earned him a permanent place in entertainment history. Comedy Central ranked him number 82 on their list of the 100 greatest stand-ups of all time, and his hometown honored him with a star on the St. Louis Walk of Fame. Dick Gregory's sharp wit and fearless activism eventually carried him into the political arena. In 1967, he made his first attempt at elected office, running against Chicago's powerful mayor Richard J. Daley. Though he didn't win, the campaign marked the beginning of his unlikely but memorable role in American politics. The following year, Gregory took an even bolder step, running for President of the United States. He entered the 1968 race as a write-in candidate for the Freedom and Peace Party, a breakaway faction of the Peace and Freedom Party. His campaign was unconventional, but it captured the spirit of the turbulent era. Gregory ultimately received 47,097 votes nationwide, one of them famously cast by writer Hunter S. Thompson. His running mates varied by state. Civil rights attorney Mark Lane in some, Rutgers professor Dr. George Wallace in New Jersey, and pediatrician Dr. Benjamin Spock in Virginia and Pennsylvania. Gregory's surprising results even outpaced parts of the party he had split from, a sign of how strongly his message resonated. The campaign landed him on President Richard Nixon's notorious enemies list, cementing Gregory as both a political disruptor and a voice the establishment feared. Gregory later chronicled his experience in the 1968 book, Write Me In. Among the stories he shared was one of his most famous stunts, printing $1 bills with his face on them. To his amusement, and the government's alarm, many of these bills actually worked in vending and cash machines before federal agents swooped in to confiscate them. Gregory dodged charges but turned the moment into a joke. Everyone knows a black man will never be on a U.S. bill. His activism continued beyond the election. On October 15, 1969, Gregory took the stage at the massive moratorium to end the war in Vietnam rally in Washington, D.C. Addressing the crowd, he quipped, "The president says nothing you kids do will have any effect on him." Well, I suggest he make one long-distance call to the LBJ Ranch. Gregory's influence wasn't limited to American audiences. In 1968, he appeared alongside author James Baldwin in London for a filmed lecture and Q&A session at the West Indian Students' Center. The short documentary, Baldwin's Nigger by Horace Ove, captured Gregory and Baldwin in conversation about black identity and the shared struggles of people in the U.S. and Britain. After stepping back from the grind of stand-up comedy, Dick Gregory never truly left the spotlight. He simply shifted the stage. He became a co-host alongside radio personality Kathy Hughes on WOL 1450 AM's The Power, the flagship station of Hughes's Radio 1, where he frequently joined the morning show to share his sharp insights. Nationally, he became a recurring guest on the syndicated Imus in the Morning program, offering the same mix of humor and blunt honesty that defined his career. Gregory's voice also reached television audiences in unexpected ways. In 2005, he appeared as Mr. Sun on the surreal comedy series Wonder Chosen. In one memorable scene, he warned the puppet character Chauncey, who was high on hallucinogens, "Don't get hooked on imagination, Chauncey." It can lead to terrible, horrible things. Gregory even lent commentary to the show's DVD release, though much of his biting critique, particularly his remarks about dairy companies and the dangers of cow's milk, was deliberately censored. Never afraid to speak truth to power, Gregory continued to appear on platforms that welcomed unfiltered voices. He delivered addresses at colleges, spoke passionately at events like the funeral of music legend James Brown in 2006, and made appearances on shows ranging from SiriusXM's Make It Plain to the Alex Jones Show throughout the 2000s. One of his most memorable public talks came in 2013, when he gave the keynote address for Black History Month at Bryn Mawr College. There, he urged students to never grow numb to injustice. To drive his point home, he compared it to the stench of paper mills or garbage trucks, explaining that workers surrounded by the smell every day eventually stopped noticing it. Gregory reminded his audience that Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. was assassinated while fighting for sanitation workers' rights, underscoring how dangerous complacency can be. Even late in life, Gregory's influence remained significant. He was featured in Pat Thomas's book, Listen, Whitey, The Sights and Sounds of Black Power, 1965 to 1975, a collection that highlighted the political edge of cultural figures during the civil rights movement. Gregory's monologues were placed alongside the voices of Malcolm X, Huey P. Newton, Jesse Jackson, Langston Hughes, Martin Luther King Jr., and Bill Cosby, an acknowledgement of how deeply his work blended comedy with activism. Dick Gregory was never just a comedian. He was a fighter, an activist who poured his voice, body, and even his health into the causes he believed in. His political activism stretched across decades and touched movements around the world. In the civil rights era, Gregory was on the front lines. On October 7, 1963, just 2 days before the historic voter registration drive known as Freedom Day in Selma, Alabama, he stood on a public platform and spoke for 2 hours, urging people to demand their rights. By 1964, he had deepened his involvement, not only in civil rights but also in protesting the Vietnam War, pushing for economic justice, and speaking out against drug abuse. His activism was often extreme and deeply personal. He went on several hunger strikes both in the United States and abroad. His actions were powerful enough that, in the early 1970s, the Australian government even banned him, fearing that he would incite protests against the Vietnam War. One of Gregory's most impactful moments came during the search for 3 missing civil rights workers in 1964, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, who disappeared in Philadelphia, Mississippi. After meeting with local officials, Gregory became convinced the sheriff's office was involved in their disappearance. With financial help from Hugh Hefner, Gregory offered a $25,000 reward for information, putting pressure on authorities. Soon after, the FBI followed his lead with their own reward, and within weeks, the bodies of the three young men were found. Gregory's determination had helped force the truth into the light. Gregory also stood up for international causes. On July 21, 1979, he appeared at the Amandla Festival in Boston, a massive anti-apartheid event that featured performers like Bob Marley, Patti LaBelle, and Eddie Palmieri. Before Marley took the stage, Gregory delivered a fiery speech directly criticizing President Jimmy Carter and declaring his support for the global movement against apartheid in South Africa. His activism didn't stop there. Gregory was a passionate feminist and lent his voice to the fight for women's rights. On August 26, 1978, Women's Equality Day, he marched alongside icons like Gloria Steinem, Betty Friedan, Bella Abzug, Margaret Heckler, and Barbara Mikulski in the National ERA March for Ratification and Extension. More than 100,000 people took to Pennsylvania Avenue, demanding the Equal Rights Amendment be passed. The effort was enough to win an extension of the ratification deadline to 1982, though the amendment ultimately fell short. Still, Gregory's presence at the march reflected his belief that equality was not just a black or white issue, but a human issue. Even later in life, he never softened his criticism of America's failures. At a rally marking the 40th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, Gregory called the United States the most dishonest, ungodly, unspiritual nation that ever existed in the history of the planet, pointing to the country's outsized consumption of the world's drugs compared to its small population. His words were harsh, but they were also consistent. Gregory had always believed that the role of an activist, like that of a comedian, was to tell the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made people feel. Dick Gregory's activism extended far beyond comedy clubs and civil rights marches. He became one of America's most outspoken critics of government narratives, injustice, and oppression, whether at home or abroad. After the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, Gregory openly rejected the official findings of the Warren Commission, which concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. On February 3, 1975, in Washington, D.C., he introduced photographic expert Stephen Jaffe and assassination researchers Robert J. Groden and Ralph Schoenman to the Rockefeller Commission, where they presented new evidence. Just a month later, Gregory and Groden appeared on Geraldo Rivera's late-night talk show, Good Night America. That night, history was made when the Zapruder film of Kennedy's assassination was shown to the American public for the very first time. The graphic footage shocked viewers and fueled widespread outrage, eventually leading to a new wave of investigations, including the Hart-Schweiker inquiry, the Church Committee, and ultimately, the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Gregory also turned his attention to the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Alongside attorney and researcher Mark Lane, he pushed for a deeper investigation, arguing that James Earl Ray had not acted alone. Together, they authored Code Name Zorro, a book that laid out their case for a larger conspiracy. Gregory's persistence played a role in convincing Congress to re-examine both the King and Kennedy assassinations. In 1998, at a birthday celebration for Dr. King attended by President Bill Clinton, Gregory mixed sharp wit with truth-telling, even joking that Clinton had made Speaker Newt Gingrich ride in the back of the plane on Air Force One, drawing laughter from the crowd. But Gregory's activism did not stop at politics. He questioned the moon landing, expressed doubts about the official 9/11 narrative, and often spoke on other controversial issues. He also fought for Native American rights. In 1966, he and his wife joined the Nisqually people in Washington state for a protest fish-in, challenging laws that stripped tribes of treaty-guaranteed fishing rights. Gregory was arrested, but staged a 6-week fast in jail, drawing national attention to the cause. Years later, he would even confront Bob Marley at the Amandla Festival, criticizing the song Buffalo Soldier for portraying black cavalry units too positively, given their role in the suffering of Native Americans. Gregory also made headlines during the Iran hostage crisis in 1980, when he traveled to Tehran in hopes of negotiating for the release of American captives. He launched a hunger strike while there, returning to the U.S. weighing less than 100 pounds. Health and diet reform became another lifelong crusade. In 1965, Gregory adopted vegetarianism, linking it to the nonviolent philosophy of the civil rights movement. His 1973 book, Dick Gregory's Natural Diet for Folks Who Eat Cookin' with Mother Nature, promoted fasting, plant-based eating, and natural health. He later developed the Bahamian diet, a weight loss drink that earned him a multi-million-dollar distribution contract. His formula was even used by the Ethiopian government during a famine in the mid-1980s. Gregory helped countless individuals, including Muhammad Ali and Walter Hudson, the world's heaviest man at the time, achieve dramatic health transformations. For Gregory, civil rights and animal rights were inseparable. He saw violence against animals as part of the same systemic cruelty that oppressed humans. "Animals and humans suffer and die alike," he once said. "Violence causes the same pain, the same spilling of blood, the same stench of death." His advocacy extended into the 2000s, when he joined Cornel West in urging companies like KFC to reform their treatment of animals. From challenging political cover-ups to fasting for justice, from marching for equality to pushing for healthier lives, Dick Gregory's activism was fearless, relentless, and uncompromising. Dick Gregory's personal life was as complex as his public one. In 1959, he married Lillian Smith, whom he had met at an African-American club. Together, they raised a large family of 11 children, though tragedy struck early when their infant son, Richard Jr., died just 2 months after birth. Their surviving children, Michelle, Lynn, Pamela, Paula, Zenobia, later known as Stephanie, Gregory, Christian, Miss, Ayana, and Johannes, grew up in the shadow of their father's demanding career. Despite his devotion to activism and performance, Gregory often admitted that his commitments kept him distant from home. He rarely had the chance to spend meaningful time with his wife and children, something he acknowledged later in life with characteristic bluntness. In a 2000 interview with the Boston Globe, when asked about fatherhood, he replied, "People ask me about being a father and not being there. I say, Jack the Ripper had a father. Hitler had a father. Don't talk to me about family." Gregory's health took a serious turn in late 1999 when he was diagnosed with lymphoma. True to his beliefs in natural healing, he claimed to manage the disease with herbs, vitamins, and exercise, crediting that regimen with keeping the cancer in remission. In August 2017, Gregory was hospitalized in Washington, D.C., with a bacterial infection. Just a week later, on August 19th, he passed away from heart failure at the age of 84. His death marked the end of a remarkable life that blended comedy, activism, and uncompromising truth-telling. When comedian and activist Dick Gregory passed away, he left behind a legacy that was far richer in influence than in material wealth. At the time of his death, Gregory's net worth was estimated at around $8 million. While he had once commanded high fees as a stand-up performer and later made money from his books, lectures, and health-related businesses, much of what he earned throughout his life was poured back into causes he believed in. From civil rights to health reform, Gregory spent decades investing in social justice more than in personal luxuries. Gregory's lifestyle reflected this philosophy. Unlike many entertainers who indulged in mansions, fleets of cars, or showy estates, Gregory lived simply. For much of his later life, he resided in Plymouth, Massachusetts, in a modest home that stood in sharp contrast to the glamorous image of celebrity living. The house itself was not sprawling or ostentatious. It had the quiet charm of a family residence, surrounded by greenery and tucked away from the noise of the city. Gregory preferred a life that gave him space for reflection and writing rather than one centered on material excess. The interior was warm but practical, far from lavish, yet comfortable enough to raise his large family of 10 surviving children. Friends and visitors often described the space as filled with books, documents, and notes, reflecting Gregory's insatiable curiosity and constant activism. His home was less about luxury and more about function, a place where ideas were nurtured and activism was planned. Today, the house still stands in Plymouth, though it carries a different story in his absence. From the outside, it remains a modest property, not heavily altered or modernized. Weathered by time, the home now shows signs of age, with its siding slightly faded and the yard more unkempt than it once was. Yet there's a quiet dignity about it, as though the walls themselves still hold echoes of Gregory's fiery speeches, quiet reflections, and endless commitment to justice. For fans who know where to look, the house has become something of an unofficial landmark, a reminder that greatness does not always reside in mansions or gated estates. Gregory also owned other properties during his career, though none were especially extravagant. In fact, the lack of opulence is what made his homes unique. He lived by example, often pointing out that wealth meant little if it wasn't used to uplift others. His choice of residences reflected the same principle. Simple homes for a man who believed his true legacy was measured not in bricks and beams, but in the lives he touched. In the years since his passing, Gregory's Plymouth home remains a symbol of his humility and devotion. While many celebrities are remembered by their lavish estates, Gregory's house reminds us that influence and impact often come from the simplest of places. His wealth may not have matched his fame, but the modest home he left behind tells a story of values far greater than money. What do you think his simple lifestyle says about the man behind the fame? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content in the future. See you next time.